The OJ Simpson murder case, one of the most infamous criminal trials in American history, began 30 years ago on June 12, 1994, when Nicole Brown Simpson and her friend Ron Goldman were found savagely murdered outside Nicole's Los Angeles home. The nation watched in shock as former NFL star OJ Simpson led police on a low-speed chase in a white Bronco, culminating in his arrest. The trial, commencing in January 1995, gripped the world with its riveting courtroom drama, exposing deep racial tensions and flaws within the American justice system. Despite overwhelming DNA evidence tying Simpson to the crime, his dream team of high-powered attorneys, led by Johnny Cochran, deftly shifted focus to alleged police corruption and racial prejudice. Cochran's unforgettable line, "If it doesn't fit, you must acquit," referring to a key piece of evidence, a glove, became iconic. The not guilty verdict on October 3, 1995, was met with a nation divided, inciting debates over race, celebrity, and justice that still resonate today. The trial not only laid bare the deep societal fractures, but also forever altered the cultural and legal landscape of America, leaving a legacy of unresolved questions and a nation deeply divided.
Gold Shields brings true stories from law enforcement, the military, true crime authors, and first responders. Experience the dedication, danger, and emotional toll with the heroes themselves. These gripping tales of true crimes, true stories, and true heroes are all here on Gold Shields.
Hey, it's Dan Murphy with Gold Shields, back once again with my partner in crime, Tom Smith. How are you today, buddy?
I'm doing great, man. This is definitely one we look forward to since someone's demise, but I think we'll get into that. But yeah, all-star cast today.
Yeah, we're very excited today. We have two friends of ours who we've become friends with since we started the show, and two awesome people who are both incredibly accomplished homicide crime scene detectives. And we're here today to talk about 30 years ago what happened in a place called Rockingham, right? Which is, it didn't happen in Rockingham. A Bundy Drive apartment, yeah, the place, right. And this is Mr. OJ Simpson, Orenthal James, who passed away a couple of weeks ago, and we contemplated doing this discussion on that date. But this is one of those shows where we have two experts on with us, one of whom was actually involved in the investigation at some point in the LAPD. And so we have today with us Barry Tellis, retired LAPD robbery homicide, which if you know LAPD, that is the top of the heap. The best of the best go there. And we have Cheryl McCollum with us, who is, where do I start with your resume, Cheryl, other than to say you're like my sister and I love you? But when it comes to crime scenes, when it comes to cold cases, I wouldn't trust anybody more than Cheryl McCollum with that. So we are so blessed to have you both with us today. And let's start talking about the OJ Simpson case. Everybody knows everything about it.
If you don't know anything about the OJ Simpson case, then you've been living under a rock for the last 25, 30 years. And it was probably the biggest case that at the time that LAPD was handling along with the district attorney's office. And it was a big case. I think it's probably the biggest case I've ever seen.
Certainly the crime of the century at that point. So June 12th, 1994, we can go back over the events all we want. Real quick, for those of you who have forgotten or were not even alive at that point, which is possible among our listeners. OJ Simpson, incredibly world-famous football player and somewhat of an actor. Some people say he was an actor, some people whatever, but he appeared in many things. He was a spokesperson for large corporations. He was married, got divorced, met a young girl named Nicole Brown. They got married, had children together, and had a rocky relationship. And during the course of that relationship, numerous police reports were filed about abuse, domestic abuse situations. She ultimately left Mr. Simpson. Their divorce happened, and it seemed he never really got over her, which leads us to the events of June 12th, 1994, where she was staying with her children, and she is killed, along with a gentleman named Ron Goldman, who worked at a restaurant that she had eaten at earlier the night. This is a long story we could unravel, but these events that took place shocked the country. This is an internationally known superstar, looked up to and revered by millions, who suddenly is finding himself in the spotlight for the death of his wife. And there are so many things I want to get into on this call with both of you, but Barry, you were called just a minute ago that you were a young patrol officer when this happened.
Well, I remember
Tell us about your recollections
a young
of that.
patrol officer. I think it only had about 7 years on the police department at the time. And I was on loan to a narcotics unit where we went into neighborhoods and bought narcotics and stuff. And it became the topic of our squad. And we're all young guys. We don't know anything about it. We just know that OJ killed his wife. And there was pretty much from the beginning, there was pretty much no doubt who the primary suspect was. It didn't take a rocket scientist to figure that one out. And then when it happened, it just became, it almost was like a big dividing. Half of the people thought he was innocent. And I'm talking about people on my department, police officers who were supposed to deal with evidence, supposed to deal with facts. And it became very, very emotional. Just because of what happened a few years before, we had the Rodney King beating, where 4 white police officers were acquitted because of the change of venue. It went out to Simi Valley, which was predominantly up middle to upper class people living out there, predominantly white, and they did a change of venue, and the change of venue went to Simi Valley. Long story short, they were all found not guilty, which sparked the 1992 riots that we had back in 1993, I think, when the riots actually kicked. So I'm sorry, 92. And so it was just a very, very tumultuous time on LAPD and in the city of LA. It was like we were on pins and needles all the time. And then when the OJ Simpson case happened, it was like, wow, okay, what does one have to do with the other? And later on, I discovered that it had a lot to do with each other. So, there I was just a young patrol guy working on loan narcotics, plainclothes narcotics. And then, the guilty verdict, the not guilty verdict happened, and you just moved on. That's our justice system. I still believe our justice system is probably the best. My opinions have changed throughout the years, just from all the stuff I've seen. And it was still a really big deal. The population in LA was pretty much divided. Like, I can't believe he got away with it. And, the other side of the fence is like, yes, he's got away with it. All right. Good job. Good job. And it was kind of sickening to me. 2 people were killed, and a certain community, the Black community, was cheering, and like it was a good thing. So anyways, it was just very confusing to me. I was, very young at the time. I didn't really know anything. And it was just a really, really very tense, I guess that's the best way to describe it, very tense time in LA. And it remained that way all the way until I retired.
Wow. You know what, Cheryl? There's certain events in history, whether it's crime, whether it's whatever, that you remember where you are, you remember what you were wearing, you remember the day, the Kennedy assassination for people who were there, 9/11, other things that happened. And OJ Simpson case is no different. People remembered this from the very first newscast of what happened. So let's go into your extensive background with investigations and what you were feeling and what you thought. And, all of us, not that you want people to die, or get killed. But all of us who are investigators and detectives, put yourself kind of there. All right, what would I do? What do you look for? What was that with you?
When I first heard it, I mean, you feel like you know OJ Simpson. I mean, he was charismatic. He was good looking. He was this phenomenal athlete. I never heard anything bad about him ever. And everybody liked him. I mean, he was one of those athletes that, you want the jersey, you want the cards, you want the autographs. I mean, he just seemed like a solid person that, again, I don't know anybody that didn't love the guy. So when I first heard it, I was like, OJ Simpson, like his wife was murdered? Like, that's horrible. Well, then I hear, no, it's an ex-wife. And then I hear, he's taken off in this Bronco, but he's only going 45 miles an hour. Well, I didn't like that at all. And then that looked very confusing for me because I'm like, that shouldn't be happening right now. So if they want to talk to him, why would he not allow that to happen and almost demand that happen? Because he does have young children with this woman. So it seems like to me that regardless of their background, he should want this person caught for his children's sake, because was this person targeting her or him? Because I think early on there was some talk and we weren't sure who might be the target. But I mean, I was 29. I was working at the Crime Commission and we were laser focused on this thing. And what are you talking about? 133 days where they call hundreds of witnesses. And it started to become this dream team they kept talking about. And we were like, man, the prosecution is going to be outgunned. And even though we knew Marsha Clark, because, she had done so much with Rebecca Schaefer case, so we knew her even in Atlanta. She had done the first, real visible stalking case. So, I felt pretty confident in her and I felt pretty confident in our system. And as it went on, it turned for me a couple of times. But the very first thing I felt was OJ Simpson was a disappointment because he's somebody we should have been able to look up to, should be able to idolize in some way. So that was sad that happened. The next blow for me was Mark Furman. That never should have happened in any way, shape, or form. And so those are the things that kind of happened in stages where you just got disappointed in this system that you have literally, at that time, I had devoted my entire adult life to. I started when I was 18. And I just, what I was watching was sad. But, I mean, it was coming down Peachtree Street, honey. It was clear. It was so clear. And all the evidence that was not collected, not properly taken care of, not bagged and tagged right. It wasn't legal. It wasn't scientific. They missed some things, like the bloody thumbprint on the back gate. That would have been a nice money tree, but they noted it and they never went back and got it. To me, that changed everything. Everything. Because if, in fact, that was his bloody thumb in the blood that was either, Nicole's or Ron's or a mixture, or even his or a mixture, I don't know how you get out of that. I mean, you can do all the little taglines you want. If it don't fit, you must have quit. And see, that's another thing. Y'all know Nancy Grace was my prosecutor for years in Fulton County. So I'm used to that caliber of a advocate, a fierce, somebody that's going to jump up and handle it. Well, when they first said that, I'm looking at Marsha Clark like, girl, get up. Say the most obvious thing. Leather shrinks when it gets wet. And she sat there. So again, there were times where I was just disappointed. But I mean, Barry, I can't imagine that being your department, that being your city, that being your case on any level, and watching it unfold. And you have to go out there every day in that uniform and get some of the backlash that I know y'all got.
Tons of backlash. It was constant. I wasn't working in the areas that are predominantly Black are in the what we call South LA. Everybody calls it South Central. But I wasn't working down. I was working there when it happened, but I was working much further south in San Pedro, which is still part of our South Bureau. And it was crazy what was going on. And thank God I wasn't working in the so-called black areas of LA. I was mostly on the West Side, Hollywood, and stuff like that. But when this thing happened, you look at all the evidence, and I got a chance to look at all the evidence. When I became the keeper of the case, I decided I want to go through everything. I want to know everything about this case. The evidence, the physical, just the biological evidence was just overwhelming. Nobody else could have done it. And our department, the unit that handled it was the division that I retired from, Robbery Homicide Division. And robbery homicide, we handled some of the biggest cases in LA, all serial killers. We handled the case that actually brought us to light was the Robert Kennedy murder, when he was killed at the Ambassador Hotel in 1969, I believe. And that case wasn't a very difficult case. It wasn't a whodunit. The guy's caught at the scene. The gun is in custody. You have at least 20 witnesses that saw him do it, saw the gun in his hand. So when they created our division, Robbery Homicide Division, it was called the Special Senator Section at the time. And the entire world was looking on LAPD. So the chief of police decided to create this unit called the Special Senator Section. And he took guys from the homicide unit and the robbery unit, put them together, and says, okay, in no better terms, don't fuck this up. And we're going to put the best of the best on this case. And this is your one case, only one case to deal with, and do it. And it went very well. Obviously, it was a successful prosecution of Sirhan. And so they said, hey, maybe we got a thing here, since we're in Hollywood, and we may have some more heavy duty, high profile murder cases. Why don't we create a unit called Robbery Homicide Division? So they created it, and it's always been kind of the pinnacle of detective work. They were the ones that everybody wanted to work. We handled all the big cases, from serial killers, killing of a police officer, the violent multiple robbery series, kidnapping for ransom. So we came as our resume was that we handle the big stuff, and we handle basically whatever the chief of police wants us to handle. And so, with that being said, when Robbery Homicide got this case, because it occurred in our West LA division, which is one of our 22 divisions. And so they started it, which is where Mark Furman was actually a homicide detective. And Mark Furman, I didn't know him. I didn't know anything about him. But from what I've heard, he was actually pretty competent as a homicide detective. He was actually very good with notes, very good with his memory, very good with locating, identifying evidence. And he had a really good reputation at the time. And when this thing happened, it just became kind of what is he doing? What is Mark Furman saying on the stand? And, I didn't know anything about it until I actually got the case. I became the keeper of the case because of a knife that was located. That may have been the murder weapon. It turned out not to be, but I ended up handling that part of it. And that's how I became the keeper of the case. So, but robbery homicide, when they handled that case, they were supposed to be the elite. And they didn't really do elite type detective work. And I'll give you an example. When OJ Simpson's lawyer brought him into the station to be interviewed, to talk to, right when he came back, I think he came back from Chicago was where he was. And they brought him in. His lawyer brought him in. His lawyer said, here, you can talk to him. No problem. I'm going to go get a sandwich. So basically, there's no Miranda issue. There's nothing. His lawyer brought him in, and they interviewed him, and he wasn't in custody. So they interviewed him for 28 minutes. They never went over a timeline. They never went over anything about the murder. And I don't know why. I don't understand. I mean, I watched a special about it and talking about it, and I'm screaming at the TV is like, why didn't you get a timeline from it? Why didn't you kind of bed him down on everything that that the detectives already knew that only the killer would know? Why didn't they do that? And I don't know why. You know, like I said, I was just a young, dumb patrol cop working the streets. And so, go ahead, Dad.
You know, go ahead, Barry. I'm sorry. I was just going to say, one of the things that jumped out to me, and it wasn't reported early, but it was reported a little bit later, when they first notified OJ, they called him in his hotel room in Chicago, and they told him that his wife was dead. And his reaction was, oh, my God. Oh, that's terrible. Oh, I'm heading back right now.
Yeah, that's what we call post-murder behavior.
Asked what happened. That is so telling. It's unbelievable. That to me right there.
Can I piggyback on that? Can I piggyback on that? So not only does he not ask how, when, where, who, he never asked about his children. I'm going to tell you right now, somebody calls me and I know Huck and Caroline are with their dad and they say, Walt's been killed. Okay, he's already in the past. My question, where are my children? He never asked that because he freaking knew they weren't killed.
He never asked that. He never, like you.
Hey, I'm gonna tell Walt you said that, by the way. I'm
just exactly the first thing.
If you ever get killed, Walt, you're going to be written off.
Somebody called me and told me that my wife was murdered and I was out of town, I would be like, what? Who did this? What are you talking about? I would be asking a whole bunch of questions, especially the kids. Never once did OJ say.
Barry, who did the interviews you're talking about? Who did those?
It was Tom Lang from Robbery Homicide. He was one of the two lead investigators. It was Lang and Van Adder were the two leads, and Tom Lang is the one who did that interview.
And Barry, can I ask you a question? You remember when somebody called him when he was in the Bronco and they were talking?
That was Tom Lang.
I believe it was Van Adder, but it was Tom Lang. I think OJ would have confessed right then if he had worded things a little different. I think they had him on the ropes right then and there.
I probably would have been asking him questions about the murder. I would have just assumed he did it, and I would have been saying, listen, man, things happen. I understand what you did. It's okay. And put it on him. And I think they probably could have gotten a confession. That was his most vulnerable point.
100%. Yep. Agreed.
So let me ask you, Barry, not that you may not know this, but it'll lead to a conversation. Why? Like, all of us have done so many cases and had bad guys in front of us or people we thought were bad guys or knew were bad guys. And you go at it a certain way. What was it? Just they were starstruck? Was it, oh my God, I really hope it's not him? What was the attitude or reasoning for not, like you said, hitting him for hours, if not days?
I don't think it was a starstruck thing. I think when we handle a big murder case, robbery homicide, the case gets put into like a big pie and everybody has a piece of it because big cases like this, you have to tap into every resource you have available. And I think Tom Lang's explanation is that he was the lead investigator. He's the guy calling the shots. But he said that the only thing he was there for was to take a picture of OJ's hands with the injuries on it and get a DNA swab from it. That was the only thing he was. And I think he got compartmentalized and he thought, okay, this is all I'm going to do because he's represented by a lawyer. But, I don't know. That's probably a great question for him. But he said in this interview that I saw, he said that his only job was to get at that point was to only get photographs and DNA and blood from him. That was it. And I don't know why. I don't know why I watched the specials on it and I just kind of scream at the TV. and going through all the discovery, all the entire case. There's 14 file boxes full of the OJ Simpson case. And I'm going through all these things. I'm like, why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that? There was a lot of things. And I don't know why. I don't know. I to this day, I don't know why. And I don't know Tom Lang, and I've never talked to him. I've never asked him, but I have no idea. His attorney handed him to us, and we should have capitalized on that. For whatever reason, we didn't.
And he seemed willing to talk. I mean, even post acquittal, we'll call it, when he wrote his ridiculous book, which I don't know if any of you have spent the time. I think I found it in a back of a used bookstore once for $2, and I picked it up and read it. I think it's called "If I Did It" or something like that. And he posits all these ridiculous theories about somebody else was there with him if it had happened. He had a dream that it had. It's unbelievable. It is the most thinly veiled confession that I've ever seen before. And I don't know who let him do that. What legal counsel lets you do that?
I think he just did it because he was such an egomaniac and he wanted everybody to like him. Because after the acquittal, he was like, everybody was giving him shit. That's why he left California and moved to Florida, because he couldn't stay in his neighborhood anymore. He couldn't stay there because everybody knew him as a killer that got away. They got away with it. And I think he was such an egomaniac and he just wanted everybody to like him that he decided, okay, well, maybe I'll just do this stupid interview and write this dumbass book and almost confess to it. I really believe if somebody was standing over him that like minutes before he died, he would have said, yeah, I did it. But who knows? That may have happened.
And we don't know if that happened. That may have happened. That may very well have happened. It was, you remember from the videos of the crime scene to him coming in, like you said, when his lawyers brought him in, to the announcement that, and I'll never forget these words, the LAPD is actively looking for OJ Simpson. One of the chiefs came on, did a press conference and said that. And then watching the New York Knicks game in the championship, the NBA Finals against Houston, and all of a sudden it breaks to the white Bronco chase, and you had the screen of the game, and in the corner you had the chase. It was bizarre. It was bizarre.
It was
bizarre to watch.
Nobody was interested in the game.
Well, you know what's funny?
I mean, it was like 9 million people because we're all at our cop bar. We're all at Manuel's. And that's all we're watching.
But, if you look at it, you look at it. I sit back and look at it now as, I've been working homicide for 20 plus years. And I look at it now and I say, man, that is such typical post-murder behavior. Not that he's looking out there looking for the killer. That was after the acquittal, of course. And that he was going to dedicate his life looking for him on all the golf courses in the country. But that was so telling. So telling. And I can guarantee you he copped out to some of his friends that he did it, that he snapped. Because that was a rage killing. That was not a calculated plan. That was a rage killing from that night. That night, he realized that.
Well, he towed Cowlings in that truck. He towed Cowlings in that truck. That's why he wrote the bogus note that he was going to kill himself, trying to gain sympathy because he knew what was coming.
Yeah, and it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out, this guy that did it, flat out. And, I'll add one thing that, did you know after the acquittal, the case, as far as the clearance of it, once the arrest is made and the district attorney files on it, the case is cleared. But once there's an acquittal, the case has to be reopened. And the case technically now is still an open investigation. And it will remain that way forever.
That's really odd because in the NYPD, we didn't do that. You made an arrest and it was closed with an arrest. And if for some reason there was an acquittal, not like we go find the real killer now. We found the killer.
And it was never done. You're supposed to write what they call a follow-up. You're supposed to write the follow-up saying there was an acquittal of OJ Simpson, and this case remains. Investigation continues. We call it IC, and it's back open. And I couldn't find that follow-up report reopening or that case remaining open, but I don't think anybody really cares at this point.
Lady Law Shield, led by Bridget Truxillo, stands as a formidable ally for law enforcement officers facing the daily challenges of discrimination, intimidation, and harassment in the workplace. Founded by Bridget, a former Florida deputy sheriff who defied the odds to ascend from an undercover narcotics detective to a SWAT team operator. Her firm understands the unique struggles and complexities of law enforcement careers. With a deep-rooted commitment to defending the rights of those who protect and serve, Lady Law Shield specializes in employment-related matters tailored specifically for law enforcement and first responders. Whether battling unjust treatment, advocating for fair treatment, or navigating complex legal issues, they are steadfast in their mission to empower and protect those who dedicate their lives to public safety. Trust Bridget Truxillo and Lady Law Shield to be your unwavering advocate in the pursuit of justice and fairness in the workplace. Go to ladylawshield.com to contact Bridget and have her in your corner. That's ladylawshield.com.
Well, Tom and I have publicly vowed, and we'll say it again right now for our audience and anyone else who's listening, that we will dedicate our professional lives, what's left of them on this earth, to finding the real killer. Because OJ's work should not go unfinished. And if there's a golf course that he's hiding on, we're going to find him. And I pledge that today, that we will continue the fight. OJ, you did not, your efforts were not in vain.
It'll end
we
up
will
being
carry
like
the torch.
Elvis working at a McDonald's in Wisconsin.
No doubt. Barry, I had this question I actually wrote down. You being in LA and you being involved in the district attorney's office as much as you were being an active cop in LA, when it was told that it was Marsha Clark and Mag, you alluded to this, and Christopher Darden, did you kind of go, really? Like, this may be the case of the century, and it's them. Was that, or were you like, oh yeah, that's good. That's a good choice.
At that time, I didn't know anybody from the district attorney's office. Patrol guys don't deal with DAs. We show up for a preliminary hearing and the case is dealt away. So I didn't know any of the district attorneys back then. I got, when I started working homicides, I got to know almost all the district attorneys. Became friends with a bunch of them. But I didn't know, like I said, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out why Chris Darden was on that case. It wasn't that he was some superstar DA. It's unfortunate that that's why he was on the case, because the color of his skin. And I think that's kind of sad. And I think it does a disservice to him, rather than, trying to appease the public, which is what I see that's going on now everywhere, trying to please popular public opinion. So who knows?
So let's go back for a second to the crime scene itself. I think there's a lot of interesting things that we could discuss about that. There's a couple of crime scenes. You have Bundy, and you have the residence back at Rockingham. So the initial response by officers to the scene at Bundy, was it called in by a neighbor walking his dog or something like that at night, or he heard the dog wailing? They get to that residence, they find this incredibly gruesome. Now, we've all seen crime scenes. This is a gruesome crime scene. The images I've seen of it, there's a lot of blood. He almost severed her head. And poor Ron Goldman, wrong place, wrong time. And he's brutally killed as well. But then They go to make the notification. Now, I think what the public doesn't understand, and many people on this show might not, is that this is a vital part of an investigation like this. Is everybody okay? What's really happening here? Was this an attempt to kill Simpson? Is he okay? If he's not, at least we have to notify him. So you've got to go to the residence. So what happens when they get there and they find the car? They find the Bronco parked outside with what looks like blood. So, Cheryl, tell us, you're at the crime scene. What they did versus what you might do, or is it the same?
I will tell you, a scene like this is going to be somewhat chaotic unless somebody says, hey, everybody slow down. You know, and you literally have to rein people in and gather them and have a plan. Otherwise, it's what I call an Easter egg hunt. Everybody's just scattered doing different things because they do know what to do. But if somebody's not directing that and then funneling all the information, that's when mistakes start to be made. So here you have 3 crime scenes that you know of. As soon as you get to OJ's house and you see the Bronco and you think that's blood on the outside of it. So now you've got Nicole's condo, the Bronco, and quite possibly inside OJ's home. So that's 3 things that you would want to be able to take control of as soon as you could. When they cannot make contact with him, then that kind of ramps it up. Well, that's when Mark Furman makes a decision. Hey, I'm going to go over the wall, make sure he's not dead in the yard or dead in the house. We don't know what's happened. That's when he finds the bloody glove. That's when he wakes up Kato Kayla. Like, this whole thing is going now. Once they get in the house, there's blood in the foyer. There's a bloody sock. Like, all these things now are like, what the heck? They don't think a killer went over there and took his sock off, and OJ's nowhere to be found. And Kato was like, no, I think he flew out. I think he's in Chicago. What the heck's going on? And then that's when Kato says, I heard a thump. You know, something hit my wall. Well, that coincides where they found the glove. If you hit that air conditioning unit, maybe something got knocked out of your hand. It makes sense. So now we have a glove at the original crime scene, and we have a glove there. That ain't a good look. And here's the other thing. I want to make this clear before I forget to mention it. Everybody says the police set him up. Police set him up. They threw the blood everywhere. Okay. If somebody's going to set you up, they're going to do it where it's a short walk. I got a lady killed here. There's the bloody knife. That's how you set somebody up. There ain't a cop in this world that's going to take a drop of blood and put it on the outside of a Bronco that somebody may or may not see and have that one drop connect 3 people. Not happening. And here's the other thing. Keep in mind, when they're doing all this and the blood is all everywhere, it's at the original crime scene, it's inside and outside the Bronco, and now it's inside OJ Simpson's home. They don't know he's injured. They couldn't have possibly said, we're going to use blood to set him up because they don't know he's cut. The setup would have been, again, a weapon, hair, clothing that they found. That's not what was happening here. The blood was the money tree.
Yeah, they're going to take Ron Goldman's wallet and put it in OJ's house. They're going to put it in the Bronco. They're going to make it
Correct.
look obvious if you're going to try to set somebody up, you're going to try to plant evidence. You're not going to plant a little tiny droplet of blood that maybe somebody will see or maybe somebody won't. You're going to put something big. Ron Goldman's wallet in OJ's car. Yeah, that would be pretty, that would be more of a setup type thing.
Don't you find it kind of telling that you can't have it both ways? If you're a defense, you have to throw a defense up that, and you have to kind of make it somewhat plausible. These are either the most bumbling, incompetent detectives, because you're trying to portray them as that they didn't take the property evidence into custody the way they should have. It wasn't properly vouched and put into safekeeping. It wasn't sent to the lab immediately. A, B, and C, right? You don't know what you're doing. But then you turn around on the same dime and say that they are shrewd conspirators trying to set up your client by dropping blood here, here, and there. You can't have it both ways. Which is it, right? I mean, and it's highly unlikely that you're setting anybody up. I mean, I think we can all talk for going to the scene of a crime and a preconceived notion. Man, could have been the husband, but you You're not going out on that limb. You're going to lose your career and go to jail.
And by that time,
it doesn't make any sense.
There was probably at least 40 people at the Bundy crime scene. At least 40 with patrol, detectives. Now robbery, homicide detectives are getting there because when we roll 10 detectives to one crime scene. And I mean, a mass conspiracy among everybody to let's get OJ. Come on. Everybody liked OJ. Nobody wanted to see him in jail. Nobody wanted to see him in trouble. And that included police officers. That's the most ludicrous thing I've ever seen.
And again, if they wanted to get him, they wouldn't have left vital evidence at the scene. And see, you can only imagine, though, the phone calls that were coming and going. Like, you got to update the mayor. You've got the governor probably calling. You've got all these people calling. So as you're working, you've got to stop and take this call. You've got to stop and update the media. You've got to stop and tell your superior what's going on. It's not like you can just stay focused on what you're doing. So again, the way I operate, the detective will do a walkthrough, I'll do a walkthrough, and then we do a walkthrough together. I'm not leaving nothing. So I'm going to have my notes. He's going to have his notes or her notes. I'm going to make a list of everything they want collected. I've got my list that I want collected. And if I've got 17 things and he's got 19, great. If I've got 27 and he's got 4, great. I'm taking freaking all of it. And again, that didn't happen here. And I think it's because it was chaotic. I've been to the scene, and Barry, you jump in. But one thing that shocked me is how little it is. So right off the street is her condo. She's got a little bitty yard. And the door, it's all super tiny. It's beautiful, but it's compact. So when he was, whoever, the real killer, fighting Ron Goldman, you're talking about a closed space. So when you say, well, he was stabbed over 30 times because he had nowhere to go up against that fence, he was trapped. And again, she was already just put down. I mean, that was one fell swoop. I mean, from what I remember, only a ligament is what kept her head on. So, I mean, it was all butt beheaded. Again, the door opened. She's inside the door right there, dropped. He fights Ron Goldman. He runs out the back gate bleeding. That's when he makes the mistake of touching the gate. He got the bloody thumbprint, and they forgot.
Yeah, big crime scenes like that, especially, we get a lot of what we call, I'm sure, Cheryl, you've dealt with this before. You get a lot of looky-loos. Everybody wants to see the body. Everybody wants to see what's going on. And I think one of the biggest problems with that scene, and I wasn't there, I do have some friends that were actually the first units on scene. And, you have to lock it down, and you have to let nobody in. And then when you have the chief of police who shows up and says, I want to see the bodies. Why? Why do you want to see the bodies? We'll show you pictures later. But, stay out of my crime scene. This is something that we're doing. We're the ones, our butts are going to be in the seat next to the district attorney during the trial. Not you, chief. Please, with all due respect, get the fuck out of my crime scene and leave us alone. And that was one of the biggest things that we had to make sure that we had lieutenants who were, at least when I was working homicide, we had people. I said, hey, man, keep command staff at bay, because everybody wants to looky-loo and everybody wants to see, especially in a case like this.
Hey, if there's any rookies listening, CSI folks, that's why I do a double tape. So I'm going to do my crime scene, and then I'm going to go out about 3 feet, and I'm going to do another. That's where the command staff can come in, that little track. But they're not coming in the crime scene. But they can come closer than the media or the general public. I'll do that for them. And then if they need to, we can set up a command center. But other than that, they're not coming in my scene.
I used to kick people out all the time.
And another piece, go ahead. And another piece of advice, if you're a young officer, if you want to be, when it comes to crime scenes, make them bigger. Make them bigger than you think you need them, because you can always pull them
Bigger's
in. You can
better.
never pull them back out and reclaim that territory.
And always make them smaller.
Once it's been walked.
It's very difficult to make them bigger.
And
the contamination.
Right. You can't. You've lost that area. It's been trodden upon and everything.
You try to make them bigger. And I always tell every time I had a crime scene and I was called at home, I said, I want one block Oh, but detective, the crime scene happened here. I don't care. Give me a block. I'll give it back when I get there. But make it big and don't let anybody in. That's how I used to roll.
That's right. That's right. Love it.
Because the more you know, the more you realize that criminals or perpetrators of violent crime don't just pull the gun out right in front of the person, shoot them, and all the evidence is in a 4-foot square. No, it's all over the place. But here's another thing I think that was probably part of the reason why there was a huge fascination with this case, because it tapped into the heart of something we don't like to talk about in America, but is the ugly side of domestic violence. It is this marital stuff that goes on behind the doors of millions of Americans' homes, is often unreported or underreported, is often not followed up on, and sadly results in homicides at times. And this was one of those cases. And I think the post-incident, the post-homicide investigation, and the revelation of all the 911 calls that she had frantically made to the LAPD, begging for somebody to do something about OJ Simpson, and the results just not being what they could have or should have been, in no way, shape, or form could be construed as being not a part of what happened here. I mean, this guy was so emboldened because he got away with it how many times?
You're talking about a statistic that we all know or should know. Your husband, ex-husband, boyfriend, or ex-boyfriend, 80-something% of the time is going to be the one that kills you. So it's somebody you've been intimate with. More than likely, if you are murdered, that's who did it. We all know that. The second thing is, once you get a protective order, that's when you're in the most danger. So here, she had gotten the restraining order, right? She thought she was doing all the steps right. I don't think she realized I've now put myself in more danger, because now a judge has told him, you can't go around her, you can't call her, you can't have anything to do with her, she don't want you coming around. And then when he went to the dance recital and maybe wasn't invited to dinner or however that transpired, I think he just could not take it, because I believe, and Barry, correct me, but I believe she started dating another running back, and I don't think he could take it. Yeah, I mean, that was too much.
I think that's what his snapping point was, when he realized, when he went to the recital and then they were all going to dinner and he couldn't go. I think that's when he realized that, oh man, I'm out of the picture. And that's what he couldn't take. That's what I believe happened. I believe that he couldn't take being out of the picture.
I think that
because
too.
She kept going back to him, and he kept getting away with all this domestic violence stuff, and he was empowered. Like, she's never going to leave me. I could do whatever I want. And I think at that point, that night, was the turning point.
Yeah, and you had the empowerment of nothing happened in domestic violence, and he had a lot of friends in the LAPD, which he was relying on as well. Like, all right, I'll be all right. You know, I didn't get busted for this. I didn't get busted for that. You know, they're not going to figure it out. They'll lose something, you know, whatever the case may be, where, you know, all of us who saw that gruesome scene, and Barry, you talked about crime scenes. I mean, we've all fighting people to stay out of a crime scene is the biggest task and biggest problem. Not to mention this one. I mean, this elevates it to a, you know, historic level of people wanting to get in there. So I could just imagine those poor guys and girls, you know, trying to keep, you know, it's hard. It's easy to say for us right now, but you're a uniformed cop with 1.5 years on the job, and you're standing in front of the crime scene. The 3-star chief walks up and says, "Get out of my way."
You know, you're absolutely right.
That's really hard to say no.
Tom, you're absolutely right. What do we do at crime scenes? We take the youngest, most inexperienced person and have them in charge of what we call the crime scene log. And we would have this crime scene log, which documents people coming and going, and we give it to the most young and inexperienced police officer at that scene. Nonsense. And that's a very important job. And you're right. You could have a guy that's like, oh, I just got out of the academy 2 weeks ago, and the chief of police comes up, "Step aside, kid, I'm going in." What's that young cop going to do? "Sorry, chief, the detective told me not to let you in. You can't come in."
And those chiefs know that.
That's an important job to document coming and going. and the potential for contamination to the crime scene, we leave it with the guy who has the least experience in charge of that, which is where we screw up. And I many times I've gone to crime scenes. I said, okay, so, hey, how long have you been on? You're doing this. How long have you been on the job? I graduated 3 days ago from the academy. I said, hijo la chinga, what's going on?
Yeah.
Where's your training officer? He's over there, and he's got 3 years on. Like, oh, boy.
Have you or Tom or Dan had this happen? You get up to a crime scene and you think, everybody knows me. I'm Batman or whatever. And all of a sudden the guy doing the law goes, can you spell your name? Who are you?
Yeah, right.
And you're like, seriously? But it's the same thing. This person is in charge and they don't even know the principal players.
Going back to something that is a part of this case you just mentioned, and I find it fascinating how much people have sort of a belief about the power of a protective order, and how, I don't think any of us on this could say that we have not recovered from a dead body, a protective order.
Absolutely.
I know I have. It doesn't stop bullets. It doesn't stop knives. A protective order works. It's a piece of paper that works against the person who respects the power of the court and the authority behind it.
And if that were true, they would be in the situation they're in.
Exactly. Yeah, protective order is typically a piece of paper.
Yeah.
And if they're going to kill somebody, they're not caring about a protective.
And I'll tell you something, the likes of Gavin DeBecker, your LA's own, if you listen to him, he'll tell you, and it's true, that a lot of times getting the protective order is the trigger point. Having the person served with it is what sets them over the edge. And sometimes not doing that is the better move. And that's a matter of properly assessing, if you know how to assess whether or not somebody's moving towards violence in that area. But
it is.
That's a common mistake people make. They run to that piece of paper in the court and they think they're protected.
And they think the restraining order is the end game. That's when you literally need to have a plan, because it's just starting, I promise you. Because if he thinks of you as property and he thinks of you as you are my wife, I own you, I dictate what happens in this family, whether you leave me or not. And if I can't have you, nobody's going to have you. And
I think that's exactly what OJ was thinking.
Not going to do well once he gets. Oh, there's no question. There's no question in my mind about that.
So now this craziness of, the crime scene coming back, the interview, the Bronco chase. Now the circus really starts and the trial begins. Now it just raised to a unbelievable level of insanity once the trial starts. It was on the cameras in the courtroom, probably the worst thing that ever happened with this trial. And because it became a soap opera, it was a movie of the week, daily though. And I remember just you couldn't help yourself though. As much as you could tell yourself, "Hey, I'm not watching this," whatever, you were drawn to it. You couldn't help it. You watched it all the time because it was just an array of people who witnesses and what they were like. It was wild.
It was fascinating
to watch.
I got a kick out of Judge Lancito when his clocks.
Yeah, that was like, I think that was one of the biggest mistakes, was having that case assigned to Lancito. Lancito, I've done a few trials with him, and he's another egomaniac. He wants to let everybody in the courtroom know how smarter he is than you. And he is not, in my opinion, he was not the best judge for this case. He was not even a really good judge at all. But I think that having Lancito, there were so many great judges on that floor, because that case had to go to what they call the ninth floor. The ninth floor of the criminal courts building is where all the high-profile cases go. Police officer murders, serial killers, all the big cases, high-profile cases go to what they call the ninth floor. And there's 7 judges on that ninth floor, and any one of the other ones would have been better than Lancito. I thought he had no control of his courtroom. I thought he was, when you talk about being starstruck, this is the trial of the century, and it falls in his courtroom. And I think that was probably not a good idea, because there were several other judges on that floor that have handled high profile cases. and would have been much better than him. I just think he completely lost control of his courtroom, and he was allowing the defense to do things. He was allowing the prosecution to do things. He didn't have any control of it, and I think it was you could just tell from the way the fiasco was, because everybody was watching, and I think a lot of it is he was playing up to the courts, playing up to the cameras. Horrible.
Everybody played to the cameras. OJ knew when the camera was on him. You could see it. It was very telling. The other part of the courtroom experience, and the ones who made the decision in this case and in every case, is the jury. Thoughts on the jury and how they reached the decision they did, and why?
That Marcia Clark did, which was she was really, really trying to show the domestic violence aspect of it. And I think she was very confident that she could reel these Black females onto her side because of the domestic violence. And I think that was another big mistake. And because, I really believe that this case, he would have been found not guilty if he was found at the scene with a knife in his hand and he confessed to it because of this jury. And, there's that special that ESPN did on it, and the jurors admitted, yeah, the evidence wasn't there. We convicted him. Do you think he did it? Well, I'm not going to say. But, it's like, what's up with that? And I don't think that he would have ever gotten a conviction had Marcia Clark not said that I'm going to have females on my jury who understand domestic violence, and that's the route we're going to do. And now, if we all watched the trial, and there was very little part about domestic violence. The defense attorneys were brilliant. They did exactly what a defense attorney should do. If they have a murdering client, deflect and blame the cops. That's exactly what they did, and they did it very, very well. They had an unlimited amount of resources and budget, so they could do anything they wanted. And like I said, every time you have a murdering client, it's like, dude, we got to divert the attention off the murder part of it, and let's blame the cops for screwing up the investigation. Very sad.
For me, again, I'm going to go back to Nancy Grace. A lot of things that happen in a courtroom are theatrical. You've got to pull people in. You've got to be passionate. You've got to show them. Marcia Clark was outdone. That's all there was to it. When she talked, people were like, okay. When Johnny Cochran got up, oh, here it comes. They were expecting this show. The other reality is you got Marcia and Christopher Darden in an office trying to do all things, which isn't possible. You've got the dream team over there doing just what robbery homicide does, divided up. Everybody's doing their expertise. When you've got somebody like F. Lee Bailey that walks in the room, game on. And then you've got, Barry and the rest of them, and you think, okay, Marcia cannot. There is no way she can understand DNA like Barry does. Not possible. There's no way she can command an entire courtroom like F. Lee Bailey. And then you throw in Johnny Cochran. Honey, stop. It's not possible. And at the same time, she's going through a divorce. As smart as she is, and she is smart, y'all, she is very competent. I mean, what she has done, that ain't her only case. Let's be honest. But when the focus becomes her hair, you've lost them. You've lost them. And then she changed
Absolutely right.
Which I thought was a mistake, because that meant you're listening to the wrong people about the wrong thing. It ain't your hair. Get in there and fight. And then I think even Christopher would tell you when he put that glove on, when they put Mark Furman on the stand, that those were blows you weren't going to recover from with a jury, whether it was jury nullification or not. I mean, it was very clear when they came back as quick as they did. After all those witnesses, they come back so fast, you know the answer.
And you know what? You brought up a great point with the witnesses and the cards are already stacked against them, as far as the prosecution goes. And then you went and you rolled the dice way too much. You rolled the dice on Mark Furman. You certainly, the biggest thing, again, theatrics, there was no bigger theatrical moment than the glove. And they played that up to the highest level and they won. And you mentioned, just real quick before we go on, you mentioned Barry, I forget it, what was his last name?
Barry Scheck. Yeah.
Sheckley?
Scheck.
DNA then was pretty new. That was just kind of the beginning of it. And he knew that like his name. And he outdid everyone. There was no prosecutor that was going to go up against that. Certainly those two. He, talk about doing your homework. And like Barry, you just said, they had a job to do. You need to convince one person. And they convinced all of them. But you need to convince one person. They were
when you have unlimited amount of money, you can get the best defense lawyers in the world to defend you. And that's what happened here.
Looking back on the trial now, and the case was 30 years ago today, the homicide, and the trial subsequent to that, and then a civil trial and all OJ's legal troubles. But looking back on it now, what I remember in many ways was the press conferences or the statements made by Ron Goldman's father to the media and his sister, and how distraught and broken up they were. And the Brown family, Nicole's sister, and all of them who knew OJ and knew this side of him the public didn't, and had dealt with Nicole when she had been a victim of his abuse, and had counseled her and helped her get the divorce and told her to move on because they didn't want to see her continue to be abused. All this stuff, the human side of this case, was overshadowed by this dream team and the theatrics in the courtroom and all that other stuff. At the end of the day, you have a young man's life taken who had no idea what was going on, and a woman who had been a long-time victim of abuse, desperately seeking to just have her own life. And that's the crime. The crime is that, and the rest of it's a bunch of smoke. But that's what history will remember. But it was very tough to watch the Goldman family, and then the Goldman, Ron Goldman's dad. I forgot his first name.
Goldman.
I'm not sure if he's passed. Fred Goldman. Very articulate, very passionate, very smart man who came out and looked at the media and said, "Do any of you doubt that he did this?" And the media just stood there with their mouths open because they couldn't. The evidence was obvious, and he was just, in his own way, appealing to the world to put this guy away who killed his son. And it fell on deaf ears. But then again, the jury shouldn't have been hearing that at that point. But just tragic for the families, tragic for everybody. And that's what's get lost in this. It's just this big high-profile case that becomes about OJ and becomes about the lawyers and becomes about all that drama. When in reality, it's kids without their mom anymore for the rest of their lives, and a young man whose life was cut short.
Very, very sad case.
It's one of those cases for me, what was, what should have been. When you saw the two of them in some of those photographs, they are such a beautiful couple. Stunning. They couldn't walk, even if they weren't famous, they couldn't have walked on a beach or into a restaurant or anywhere without heads just turning, because they're both just flawless. And you think, you've got it all. You've got fame, but not fame in a negative way. Literally, everybody loves you, dude. You've got more money than you could ever burn. How in the world are you not grateful and happy every day? And when you start talking about this domestic violence, I think that's what's so difficult for people, because looking at it from the outside, they are a couple where you would say they got it all. They are happy. She's beautiful. He's handsome. They've got these children that are absolutely adorable. They live in a mansion. What more gifts could you possibly have bestowed on you? And yet, it's ugly. It's mean, it's violent, and at the end, it's deadly.
You never know what happens behind closed doors.
So well said. So well said. You know what? We could probably do this for another 3 hours, with this case, with what we all have and opinions and experiences. And that's why we wanted to do this. We wanted to get all of us together with the experience that we all have and kind of go over this case, which we were looking to do for a while. And then just thankfully we got to do this with, I don't just say this, Danny doesn't just say, two great people with such experience and such knowledge of what crime scenes are about and what instincts are about and what, knowing and not knowing and the right thing to do are all about. And, that's why we wanted to do this, to give a new 30-year after the fact perspective of this case that is, no one's ever going to forget. No one's ever going to forget. And I cannot just thank more the both of you for coming on the show and talking about this. It was everything we thought it would be. Great conversation. So thank you so much.
Well, I love the two of you. And Barry, it was fabulous to finally meet you and hear part of your story. I found myself just listening to you, and I was like, oh, I guess I got to say something. But it was fabulous. I appreciate it.
Of course, Cheryl. Pleasure meeting you. These guys couldn't say enough about you.
Well,
because I asked him in D.C., I go, so who am I going to be? Who's the other guest? Oh, Cheryl. Oh, you're going to love her, man. She's the best. I said, cool.
Cool. No, they were fabulous. And if you ever need anything in Atlanta, you let me know.
I will definitely keep you in mind. It's nice being retired, though.
All right, gentlemen. Boy, don't rub that in. Y'all make me sick. It won't be long, though, maybe. We'll see.
Well, guys, thank you so much once again. And I think we can sum it up by saying that 30 years ago today, a horrible tragedy. And maybe we could learn something from it as a society, right? I think maybe we could learn to pay more attention to domestic violence calls and calls for help. I know there's a lot more resources today than there were back then, and I hope that's the case in every jurisdiction. I hope law enforcement's taking it more seriously now than they did then. Not to say they didn't, but I think we see some failures a lot of times in that area. But also, just generally speaking, anybody can do anything. And it doesn't matter if they're a high-profile person or a wealthy person. If you're a police investigator, you should be looking past that and looking at evidence and evidence only. Evidence of who did it and placing the blame where it lies and bringing a proper case to prosecution regardless of political pressure, regardless of media pressure, regardless of whoever is watching you. It doesn't matter. You have to be a pro. And we saw a bunch of professionalism and some failures in this case. We saw both of them. So I think collectively we are the type of people that we want to learn from this kind of stuff. So anyone watching this who's going to be a cop or detective, don't be blown away by a person who's got notoriety. If they did something, hold them accountable.
100%.
Right? Tom, take us out, brother.
Absolutely.
Like you always do.
So, listen, this is the important part of the show that we thank and pray for all law enforcement officers out there, past, present, retired, active. Pray for them because it's a tough job, and it's, you still have the memories afterwards, that we have to deal with. And no one out there asks for anything in return. They just do it because they love it. So keep them all in your prayers. And our little selfless plug, youtube.com/@goldshields. Make sure you hit that subscribe button, hit the bell. Zone 7 on every conceivable platform you could think of, and an absolute phenomenal show with Cheryl McCollum. Tune into that. Barry, thank you so much again.
I will. I definitely will.
Say
and
hi
thanks
to
for having
Tanya
me.
for sure.
And I love you guys, just like Cheryl says.
And thank
Max,
you.
say hi to Walt.
Absolutely.
Anytime.
Appreciate it, buddy. Appreciate it. Look forward to breaking bread with all of you together at some point in the near future. We have to figure that out.
Absolutely right. So for Barry Tellis, Cheryl McCollum, my partner Dan Murphy, this is Tom Smith. Be safe, be careful. We'll see everybody soon.